When you log into a website, do you ever wonder what's happening behind the scenes? What logic is being worked out that allows you to continue using the website and using protected routes on that website? Well, I can't speak for all websites, but I can speak for the Coding with Callie website builder. By the way, hi, I'm Callie. I'm building a website builder, and I just started a new project, and I'm working out the authentication. All right, so let's take a look. My website here has a login route, all right, that takes a username and password. All right, so when I click send, it can't send the request because my API is not running. Let's go take a look at how to get the API running. I'm writing this backend in Go. My main reason is because I use Go at work, and so I'd like to, in my personal time, work on things that will also help me out at work. So I'm building my Go skills. So Go starts out with a main function, all right, that you run, and then everything kind of works from there. All right, so what am I doing in this main function for my server? I'm loading my config, all right, so that's like my environment variables. All right, I'm setting up a logger because I want to be able to see what's happening in terms of requests and logic throughout the actions that are taken against my server. I'm connecting to my Postgres database, and then I am setting up my router, and I'm making sure that my router uses my request logger, which is set up down here, but we're going to go over logging in another video. All right. Finally, I am setting up my auth service and my auth handlers, and I am running my server on port 8080. So if we go ahead and take a look now, I can run my program by saying go run command/server/main.go, which is right here. All right, and that is going to run that main function, which starts my server up. All right, so you can see, right, I passed my logger into my database connection function, and you can see that I'm getting logs about the connecting to the database. So my website builder database already exists, so I don't need to create it, which it would have if it didn't. And then it's saying it's connected, so we're ready to go. You can see that I have these two routes that are used in my server, my login and my auth user detail route. So let's go ahead and go back to Postman, and let's click send now. And you will see that we have an access token that is returned. So if we start at super high level of what's happening when you log into the Coding with Callie website builder is you're passing your username and password to a post request, all right? And then if everything works out how it's supposed to, you get an access token back that then you can use for future requests. So let's go take a look at a future request, right, to auth details. So this is a protected route, which means that we need to send our access token with the request, which you can see, woohoo, I did. How do we know we did that? Because I had this JWT in the cookie. But how do I have that JW in the cookie? And that, my friends, is where the login logic starts to play. So the first thing that's helpful to do when you're into a new code base and you're trying to figure out what's what is I like to look at the logs, all right? The logs are going to tell us what happened. All right. So you can see here, all right, this is when we started up our server, and then this is all of the actions taken since then. So we have an info log that we logged in a user, and that was with the username Callie Stoska. All right, so that's when they started logging in. Then you can see that they successfully logged in, so yay us. And then you can see that we had 2 requests completed. One was to the login route, and one was to the auth user details route. All right, which matches what we did on Postman, right? Let's dig a little deeper. Okay, so when we register our auth handlers, let's go to those auth handlers and take a look at what's happening. So those are going to be in internal, auth, and then handlers.go. All right, and so here you can see that this register auth handlers was what that main function called to get that login route registered. All right, so now here is the handler for login that's called, and you can see that here. So router.post request at login, and then you can see that it calls our login handler function, and it passes in the context of the request and the service. So that way we can use the service function. All right, so let's go to login. We want to get the request body from the login. We're gonna get that from that context. So this is how we get it, through the bind JSON function. So we're taking the request body out of the context and we're binding it to this request body variable. So we're putting what's in the context in that request body into our variable that we created. And then we're saying if there's an error doing this, then we're going to return a bad request status and say, listen, you didn't send the correct request body, and we weren't able to put it in that variable. All right. If there's no error, though, we can continue, right? Because we return if there's an error. So if there's no error, then we don't return. So the next thing that we do is we actually pass then that request body username and password to our auth service login function. All right, which ultimately returns an access token and potentially an error. Okay, so let's hop over to our service.go and let's look at this login function here. Let's walk through the steps and see what's actually happening in the logic. So far we had a handler that extracted the request body, which we look in our postman. You can see our request body is the username and password. Then we pass the context and the username and password to our login function. So here we see our logger is making a log there, which is that logging in user with the username, which we saw here. So that's at the beginning of the logic starting. All right. Our next step is we want to get the user from the database. All right. We need to make sure that that username corresponds to a user in our database. All right. If it does, cool. All right. Then we can compare their passwords. If it doesn't, that's a problem because someone's trying to log in with an incorrect username. So then we would, well, I have it printing an error, but I'm going to need to go back and fix that. What I need to do is I need to log an error and then also return an error too. This is a good thing that I need to make sure I'm going back and reading my code and not being lazy with what I'm doing. Okay, so if we do find the user, right, then yay us, what we're doing then is we are going to get that password out of the user and we're going to put it into this variable here. We want to know the password that's stored for that user in the database. Let's go ahead and open up our database and take a look at what that is, because this is a little bit of complexity. All right, so if we look, that is not a plain text password, which is good. We don't want a plain text password. We want to hash our passwords before we create our users. All right, because if someone hacks into your database and is able to get all of your users, we want them to not just have the username and password ready to go, so that way they can log in and do damage. Okay. Let me minimize that. So what we need to do then is, because right, we're getting the password that's getting passed in here is the plain text. It's the some password, right? The stored password is a hashed version of a password, of plain text password. So luckily, bcrypt has a compare hash and password method that we can just use. All right, so we pass in the password from the database, we pass in the password that we're trying to compare it with, and it will automatically compare, and it will throw an error, or return an error if an error exists, right? So if the error exists, then we can go ahead and log the error message and return that error, all right? And if you look at the handler, that returned error will be returned here, and then that's where we will send a JSON unauthorized message back, okay? Let's take a look at that part of it, okay? So if we log in, we went over 2 edge cases here, right? The user doesn't exist, which we're not gonna get a log for because I didn't code that, but let's try. So invalid username or password is the message we got back. And you can see that we got this 401 status, which is the unauthorized status. All right. And you can see that we got an error. You can also see that SQL logged for us. So what we want to do is we want to turn that into a better log there, and we will. Okay, so that's what happens if we don't have a user that corresponds. Now let's try what happens if we do a wrong password. All right, invalid username or password, good. And then this is what we wanted to see, what we want to see. We want an error saying login failed, and then we want to log the actual error, which comes from bcrypt, that hash password is not the hash of the given password. So that's telling us what happened. The username was Callie Stoskap, and then we have the request error that says 401. So that's perfect. This is the 401 log that you're seeing. And let's go to service. This is the login failed error that you're seeing, okay? But we're returning, right? So if there's an error, we're out of this function. Otherwise, we can continue, okay? So this is assuming now that we are at the point where we A, have a user corresponding to that username, and B, the password that was passed into the login request is the correct password, okay? Because of this, now we can generate a JWT. All right, when you generate a JWT, you want to also include an expiration time. What that means is that you are saying that this token, okay, JSON Web Token is JWT. You also might hear it called JOT. All right, you're saying that this web token expires in 5 minutes. All right, so I can only use it on protected routes for 5 minutes. So let's go and take a look. Over here, it's been more than 5 minutes since I sent that request. So you can see that we are unauthorized from using it, okay? Because it's expired. Next. All right, so we'll go over JWTs a little bit more in another video, but mostly we use the JWT package to do it. All right. Then if we're able to create the token, we send a log saying that we logged in successfully, which we saw in the beginning. We set the set cookie response header with our token, and we set our username in the context too. So the C, if you remember, is that context that we passed in. So that keeps all of the request and response headers and information in there. It's really handy that you can just pass around to your functions and add information to it. So the reason why we want to add this username is so that way we can log the username for who failed, because I just wanted that information. All right. And then at the end of it, we will return our token string and nil, right? In Go, you can return multiple things. So here we are returning the token string, and then nil is referring to the error, right? So we'll have the access token, and then we'll have an error. Error will be nil. So we'll skip over this, and instead we will return an HTTP status OK, which is 200, and the access token, which is what you see here when we send the correct username and password. And now you can see that for the next 5 minutes, we would be able to get the user details. All right, so that is a walkthrough of all of the logic that's happening when you log into the Coding with Callie website builder. All right. One thing that I really like about Go is, because I'm still learning Go, so also any feedback anyone has, please let me know. I'm not saying I'm an expert at Go, so I would love to know how I can refactor this better. But anyway, what I really love about Go is I love that we have to error handle at every single point. All right. I feel like in TypeScript, it's something where I'm like, oh, I need an error handle, but I'll do that later because I'm busy, right? I just want to get this working, so I don't do it. And then I end up regretting it later when I'm like, oh, wait, I just had an error and it's not handled. And now I'm trying to look through my logs and I don't know what's going on, right? So I like that Go mandates that you handle your errors. I think it makes for a lot cleaner code. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any feedback, let me know. And in the next video, we will go more into JWTs. All right, cool. See ya.